many ways, Dan, the big takeaway from today is around income tax, because essentially you guys argued before the election you were not going to increase it. And yet, let's be clear, a lot more people are going to pay a lot more income tax by the end of this Parliament.
You can get the manifesto up on the screen if you want. I think we might be looking at some charts instead, but it said we would try and keep taxes on working people as low as possible and that we wouldn't be increasing the main rates of VAT, income tax or national insurance. And in this budget, the Chancellor has made her choice and she hasn't increased the rates of income tax. Yes, we are asking people who are workers to contribute a bit more at the very end of the decade through freezing the thresholds. But we've also made a whole range of tax decisions, which I'm sure we're going to go through with Ed in a second, that minimise that contribution.
Dan, isn't this why, out of respect, voters hate politicians? Because if you say we're not going to increase the rate on income tax, the assumption I would think most ordinary people would think is that their income tax is not going to go up. Let's be honest about it, you are increasing people's income tax.
When we took office, the rates were 20 and 40 and 45, and they're still 20 and 40 and 45 for workers up and down the country. We said that we would stick to that commitment, and we have stuck to that commitment. People can go and read the manifesto, they can find the text online. We were clear that we weren't going to be increasing the main rates of income tax, and we haven't done that.
As you say, Ed's going to take us through some graphs that are going to show definitely that tax has been a big issue in this budget, Ed.
Yeah, because I remember, Minister, you know, I remember when the manifesto came out, you gave us a bit of detail about the way where you were heading with your tax policy. And we kind of charted it out at the time. This is the tax burden, the total amount of tax, you know, across the economy that people are paying. Hold on, let's get to the next one. That is more or less where it was heading under the last government. But that is, broadly speaking, where the manifesto suggested it was going. And now I'm going to bring up where it went last time around, so higher, and now where it's heading under this budget. You've got to admit that, which is 37 and a bit %, is a lot lower than the 38% or so that we're going to see by the end of the Parliament. And that's the thing you sold people on at the election, right?
So we didn't know when we wrote our manifesto that when we would get into office, we would find that the Conservatives had left us with all that spending that wasn't funded, with all those hospitals that they said they were going to get built, that weren't getting built, and all the overspending, for example, in the asylum system. And the Chancellor made some decisions last year on tax. Yeah. And then in this budget, again, look, the manifesto was written without us knowing that the OBR were going to take 16 billion tax revenues away from us through their revisions to the long-term productivity forecast. And you've read the words in the OBR document today.
Part of it is
they were really, really clear that this isn't about what this government has done. It's the long-term weakness that we've seen for so long that we've got to rip ourselves away from in terms of low growth and low productivity because of things like botched Brexit deal, austerity that took money away when we should have been putting it in. Right. And the Chancellor's been clear, right? She is operating in the world as it is. And our choice could have been to go to more austerity, to take money out of public services. It could have been to increase borrowing like Liz Truss did, but instead we're getting the deficit down every year.
Sorry, let's be honest. Let's be honest about this. You also did not want to increase taxes by as much because you wanted to tackle things like the winter fuel allowance and you wanted to tackle welfare. And your backbenchers have not allowed you to do this. To argue this is everyone else's fault is rubbish because ultimately you did want to tackle some of these issues and your party wouldn't allow it.
We do want to tackle some of these issues. That's why, you know, today the Chancellor announced, for example, a reform to the Motability Scheme, where under the previous government people could use their welfare payments to get expensive cars. Lots of different expensive cars were available on the Motability Scheme, and instead we're saying now that it's fair, just like everyone else, when they go out to buy a car, they can pay VAT on that, for example. That's why we're saying we're going to go after fraud and error in the welfare system. That's an extra £2 billion we're going to bring in. We've got this youth guarantee that the Chancellor announced at conference, so that young people after 18 months can be in a job rather than continuing to be not in education, employment or training. Look, we've got to continue to reform the welfare system.
Well, we'll see if your party likes it.
Just a couple more charts, OK? Because I just want to know
let's do some charts.
How comfortable you are. This is showing you that the extent to which various different parliaments, going back to the 1970s, have been tax-raising parliaments or tax-cutting parliaments. Where do you think your parliament is heading right now?
I saw your tweet earlier, so, yeah, there's no surprises here.
Do you think it's down here, like tax-cutting parliament?
No, because we don't have, you know, billions and billions and billions coming in from North Sea oil, which should have been spent on building something like a national wealth fund for the country, but was spent on short-term tax cuts under the Tories.
You know you're up here, don't you?
Well, let's have a look.
Should we have a look? It's the... So where things are heading right now, it looks like this is going to be the biggest tax-raising parliament basically in history, or at least certainly since the 1970s when the comparable data begins. I mean, you're kind of OK with that? You're cool with that?
First of all, I would say, let's see where we get to by the time of the next election. I'll come back here and look at some more charts.
This is the data we have so far.
Last year, the OBR said that the economy would grow by 1%. We beat that forecast this year. It's growing by 1.5%.
Yeah, and weaker in the next 5 years.
And I want to see, and the Chancellor wants to see, us growing our economy faster. That means higher wages for people. It means higher living standards. The last Parliament was the worst Parliament on record for living standards, and yet we've already got living standards rising faster.
This one looks like it's going to be the second worst.
We've already got wage growth rising faster in the first year of this Parliament than it did over the whole first 10 years of the Conservatives. And actually, what are we doing today? We're announcing a massive change, £150 off people's energy bills. That's really going to help next year as well. It's going to come in April, 0.4%. Off of inflation. We're doing all we can to try and support people with
politically,
cost of living.
Dan, I mean, Rishi Sunak said there's one thing that's guaranteed with the Labour government, and by the way, if you look at all those red lines, it's also true, is that they will increase your taxes. I mean, Rishi Sunak was right. A Labour Party that always increases your taxes.
You know what you can guarantee with a Labour government? You can guarantee that we're going to focus on the cost of living, getting those energy bills down by £150. We're going to make sure that rather than turning to austerity, taking money out of the economy when we need to invest in our public services, we're going to invest in the NHS. The Chancellor's announced 250 new neighbourhood health centres this year.
Are you saying, OK, if we take, for instance, all of the extra spending we've just heard about in this budget, that's the slug of £32 billion, at the end of the forecast horizon. This is all the extra spending you're doing. How much of that is the NHS?
We're going to see it around here, I imagine. Let's have a look.
Shall I show you? The vast, vast majority is welfare spending. It's not the NHS, isn't it?
So what you've done here, and it's fair enough, you can look at the changes.
OBR data.
Yeah. You could look at the change since we took office. So we, in the budget last year, which was a really important event, we said that we're going to spend...
This is just the change since the last budget.
50 billion extra on our public services. We're not turning
but this is the change since the last budget, isn't it?
Instead, we're going to invest in our public services. That's what we've got to do. Look, people elected a Labour government because the NHS wasn't working, because there weren't enough police on the streets, because schools were crumbling, and this budget and the last budget meant that we're increasing spending on public services. Yes, we've got to make sure every pound is looked after.
We're casting this as an NHS budget, but where is the NHS in it?
The big investment in the NHS, and you remember this from last year, came through the decisions that we made to...
So it's the last budget,
Came through the decisions that we made to spend more money on the NHS. And look, what could have happened with the OBR coming along with its downgrade, £16 billion of tax revenues taken out because of decisions that have been made in the past... I tell you what, I bet if there was a different party in power now, Tory or Reform, they would have cut spending on public services. Okay. They would have taken away nurses, they would have taken away doctors, they would have cut spending on the police. And that's not a choice that the Labour government's going to make.
Let's just end on growth, because actually the number one priority, apparently, for this government has been economic growth. Keir Starmer once said you can tax your way to economic growth. And what's economic growth going to look like?
Should we have a look at the economic growth numbers? Yeah, well, so this is the growth forecast last time around. It was quite weak in 2025.
I'm standing in front of the one, so I'm just moving out of the way.
Yeah, you're standing in front of the one, because that's the one. That's the good one. That's the clue here. Let's see what the OBR said this time around. The higher the bars are, the better off we're all getting as a nation. And basically, it's just as well you're standing there, because that's the only upgraded number. And actually, a lot of people would say a lot of that growth has already happened. But isn't the story that all of these years are a bit worse than expected? And maybe that's partly because the OBR's changed its mind, but maybe it's also because a lot of the policies that you've just announced are quite kind of growth negative, because they mean that you've got less activity going on in the economy.
So this is the year that we've been living through.
Yeah.
That was their forecast last year, and this is what's happened with the Labour government that is investing in the future of this country.
Should we also talk about the other bars?
We can definitely talk about the other years. We've got to see those numbers increase. We have to see more growth and productivity in this country. And all mainstream economists, I know that you'll think this too, we know that one of the main ways to get growth up in our economy is through public and private sector investment. And we're doing that in this government. Again, what would have happened in any other government...
That's not reflected in that.
What would have happened in any other government would have been at this budget, with that £16 billion downgrade and all the headwinds that we've had from the economy in recent years, I bet you capital spending would have been slashed, just as it was in 2010, when the schools weren't invested in, when hospitals were left to go to ruin. The Chancellor's kept that £120 billion of investment, and the OBR are clear that for the long term, that will increase growth rates, that will increase jobs, that will increase employment in this country. And I think that is the right decision for the country.
OK.
All right.
Ed, Dan,
he's been a good sport, hasn't he?
It's been a very good sport taking part in
screen.
that, particularly going up against your graphics, Ed.
It's not a competition.
They're very good graphics.
Very good indeed. OK, Ed, Dan, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.